For my birthday, my wife left a frozen pizza on the counter and sent me a cold congrats text. Just 1 week earlier, she and her friends threw my best friend a huge backyard bash with fireworks and a drone photographer. When I asked why she had put so much effort into his birthday but almost none into mine, she barely looked up from her phone. "You've never really been into celebrations," she said. I did not argue with her. I did not cook the pizza. I walked upstairs, packed a bag, and left. Before midnight, my phone was filled with messages asking where I had gone and why everyone was panicking. My mother-in-law's message was the strangest of all. Why is everyone freaking out? To understand why that question finally pushed me over the edge, you need to understand the kind of person I had spent most of my life trying to be. My name is Ethan Cole, and I have never been the kind of man who enjoys shouting matches, dramatic exits, or smashing things just to make a point. I am usually the reasonable one. I remember appointments, carry extra phone chargers, arrive early, and bring food to gatherings even when nobody asks. I am dependable in the least glamorous way possible. For years, I thought being reliable was one of my best qualities. By my 34th birthday, I had begun to suspect that the people closest to me saw it as permission to stop noticing me. I woke up that morning with cautious hope. I was not expecting a surprise trip, an expensive gift, or a house full of guests. I would have been happy with breakfast, a handwritten card, or even a sincere happy birthday before my wife checked her social media. I showered, put on a decent shirt, and walked downstairs around 8, feeling faintly ridiculous for treating the day as though it might matter. The kitchen looked exactly as it did on any ordinary weekday. There were no balloons, no card by the coffee maker, and no cake hidden badly beneath a dish towel. Empty yogurt containers from Lauren's late-night snack were still on the counter. A spoon sat in the sink. The room smelled faintly of old cheese and coffee grounds. I checked my phone. Nothing from my wife. Not a call, not a message, not even an automated greeting from my dentist. I made my own coffee and sat at the table, telling myself she was probably waiting until later. Maybe she had arranged dinner. Maybe she wanted the surprise to happen after work. Maybe I was judging the day too early. Looking back, Hope was doing most of the work in our marriage by then. I worked from home, answered emails, and sat through a video meeting in which my manager, Grant, asked me to revisit a project I had already completed twice. At noon, Lauren still had not contacted me. By 3, I was receiving birthday messages from former classmates I barely remembered, yet there was still nothing from the woman who had shared my home for 10 years. I kept inventing excuses for her because that had become one of my unspoken responsibilities. She was busy. She had lost track of the date. She wanted to surprise me in person. At 6:30, I heard her car pull into the driveway, and despite everything, my heart lifted. I sat in the living room pretending to read while listening for the front door. Lauren came inside carrying grocery bags in her gym duffel. "Hey," she said without looking at me. She walked into the kitchen and began unloading groceries with the bored efficiency of someone completing a chore. I waited for her to turn around, laugh, and reveal that the indifference had been an act. Instead, she put several items in the refrigerator, left one frozen box on the counter, picked up her phone, and went upstairs. After 5 minutes, I walked into the kitchen. The box on the counter was a frozen pizza from the cheapest section of the grocery store. It was not in the oven. The plastic had not been removed. There was no note beside it, and no suggestion that Lauren planned to cook it later. It had simply been placed there, still frozen, as though feeding me on my birthday was a task she had remembered halfway through another errand. I stared at it longer than I care to admit. Part of me expected her to come downstairs with a real gift and tell me the pizza was a joke. Instead, my phone vibrated. The message was from Lauren, who was one floor above me. "Congrats, Ethan." That was it. No heart, no exclamation mark, no "I love you," and not even the words "Happy birthday." It sounded like something a coworker might send after I completed a certification course. I read it twice, then looked again at the frozen pizza. 10 years of marriage had somehow been reduced to an unopened cardboard box and a text that required less effort than confirming a delivery order. What made it impossible to dismiss was what had happened the previous weekend. My best friend Derek had celebrated his birthday at our house. Lauren and several of her friends had transformed the backyard into an event venue. They rented a tent, ordered catered sliders and truffle fries, built a champagne display, strung lights through the trees, and arranged fireworks after sunset. Lauren had even hired a drone photographer to capture aerial footage of the party. During one pass, the drone nearly clipped Derek's cousin Owen, but Lauren had laughed it off because the footage looked impressive. I helped prepare everything. I moved furniture, hung lights, carried tables, cleaned the grill, and made 3 trips to the liquor store when the alcohol ran low. Lauren spent the evening glowing with pride. The next morning, she uploaded dozens of photographs with captions about celebrating extraordinary people and making sure the people we loved knew how much they mattered. I had seen those posts. I had also seen the credit card charges. A few days before my birthday, I asked her about the difference. I tried to sound casual because even then I was afraid of appearing needy. I said I did not require fireworks or a professional photographer, but I wondered whether we might do something together. Lauren stared at me as if I had asked for a marching band to perform in our living room. "You aren't really the celebrating type, Ethan," she said. "You've always preferred keeping things low-key." Then she returned to her phone. The statement bothered me because it was not true. I had never said I disliked being celebrated. I had simply learned not to request much because requests were frequently treated as burdens. Over time, Lauren had mistaken my willingness to accept less for proof that I wanted nothing. Standing in the kitchen on my birthday, I did not feel an explosive burst of anger. Something quieter happened. It was as though a switch inside me finally moved into a new position. I saw the pizza, the text, Derek's party, the bills I paid, and all the excuses I had made for Lauren, and the pattern became impossible to ignore. I walked upstairs, pulled an old duffel bag from the closet, and packed clothes, toiletries, my laptop, and its charger. Lauren was lying on the bed scrolling through her phone. She glanced at the bag only when I zipped it. "Going somewhere?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Somewhere I'm not treated like an item on a grocery list." She frowned, but she did not put the phone down. I carried the bag downstairs and left without shouting or slamming the door. I did not throw the pizza away. I did not leave a dramatic letter. I simply removed myself from the house. I drove without a plan until I saw the vacancy sign outside the Sunset Inn. The name was misleading because the building faced east and appeared not to have enjoyed a proper sunset in decades. The sign flickered over a parking lot filled with faded lines and tired cars. I sat behind the wheel for several minutes, trying to absorb the fact that I had just walked out of my marriage. Then I took my duffel bag inside. The lobby smelled like industrial cleaner and a microwave dinner. Behind the counter sat a young employee whose name tag read Tyler in large capital letters. One earbud remained in his ear while he watched something on his phone. I tapped the little brass bell. Tyler looked up with the resigned expression of someone whose evening had just been interrupted. "Need a room?" he asked. "For tonight," I said. "Possibly longer." My housing situation became unexpectedly flexible. He typed on an ancient computer and asked whether I wanted one king bed or two queens. I told him one bed was enough, because I was traveling alone in every possible sense. While processing my card, Tyler looked at the bag and asked, "Celebrating something?" I could not tell whether he was joking. "My emotional independence," I said. He studied me for a moment, then gave a small approving nod. "Good for you. Room 237. Second floor. Elevator's broken. Naturally. The ice machine is broken too," he added. "There's a vending machine, but it only accepts bills when it feels respected." I thanked him for the sales presentation, collected the key card, and climbed the stairs. The hallway carpet had the chaotic pattern hotels use when they want stains to become part of the design. Room 237 was at the far end. The key card failed twice before finally turning the light green. The room was exactly what $89 bought at short notice. The comforter had an alarming floral pattern. The television looked old enough to remember dial-up internet. The bathroom was barely wider than my shoulders, and the air conditioner rattled as though it contained loose silverware. Yet when I set my bag down, the first thing I noticed was the relief. Nobody expected anything from me there. Nobody was waiting to criticize how I folded towels or complain about water spots on the sink. My mother-in-law was not sitting at the dining table drinking wine I had purchased while lecturing me about being a provider. Lauren was not sighing because I had turned on a lamp while she wanted darkness. The room was shabby, but for that night, it belonged entirely to me. I ordered a hot pizza from an actual restaurant. When it arrived, I sat cross-legged on the bed, ate directly from the box, and watched a terrible reality program about people bidding on abandoned storage units. The pizza was excessive, greasy, and wonderful. Around midnight, my phone began vibrating. Lauren asked where I was. Then she wrote that my behavior was not funny. A few minutes later, she asked me to confirm that I was safe. Derek messaged me. Lauren's sister Natalie messaged me. Then Patricia, Lauren's mother, wrote, "Why is everyone freaking out?" I stared at the question. She was not asking what had happened to me or whether I needed help. Her concern was that other people were reacting to my absence. I could have written a long answer. I could have told Patricia that her daughter had celebrated my best friend as though he were a celebrity and treated her husband's birthday like an inconvenient delivery. I could have explained that I had spent years paying bills, solving emergencies, absorbing insults, and being available to everyone while becoming nearly invisible in my own home. Instead, I held the power button until my phone went dark. The silence afterward felt almost physical. I brushed my teeth with the complimentary toothpaste, changed into an old shirt, and climbed into the scratchy hotel bed. The air conditioner clattered. Someone down the hall watched an action movie at full volume. A man in the next room snored with astonishing force. None of it bothered me. Every strange sound belonged to a night I had chosen for myself. The following morning, sunlight pushed through curtains that were too thin to block anything. For 3 seconds, I forgot where I was. Then I saw the duffel bag and remembered. I turned on my phone and watched it struggle beneath dozens of notifications. There were messages from Lauren, Patricia, Derek, Natalie, and several people who had not spoken to me in years. Everyone had suddenly become interested in my well-being once I was no longer available to manage theirs. I ignored the messages and opened my banking application. Leaving the house had forced me to think about practical matters, and the list of recurring payments was waiting for me in neat rows. Netflix was billed to my card, so were Hulu, Disney Plus, and HBO Max. I paid for the home internet, the security system, cloud storage, a meal delivery subscription, a fitness service, and a recipe application I had never used. The Spotify family plan was in my name, even though I preferred another music service. The family phone plan cost $180 each month and included 4 lines. One belonged to me, one belonged to Lauren, one belonged to Patricia, who had joined our plan because it was supposedly easier. The 4th belonged to Derek, who had been between plans for 2 years. I had also been paying for several services used by people outside our household. When I added everything, I realized that roughly $450 left my accounts each month to support conveniences that mostly benefited everyone except me. The money mattered, but what bothered me more was the assumption underneath it. Nobody asked whether the arrangement still worked for me. Nobody offered to reimburse me. I had become the automatic payment method in human form. Because I was reliable, they treated my continued support as a permanent law of nature. Sitting on the hotel bed, I realized every account was connected to my email address, my cards, and my passwords. I was not required to keep financing a household I had just left. I was not required to provide entertainment and phone service to adults who had barely noticed my birthday. I did not cancel everything in a burst of rage. I wanted to separate my finances carefully and avoid disrupting anything I was legally responsible for. I gave myself 3 days to research individual phone plans, change passwords, update billing addresses, redirect my mail, and make sure I understood which services were mine to close. I wrote the plan in my notes application. Day 1, arrange my own phone service, investigate temporary housing, and contact Vanessa Liu about the job she had offered me several times. Day 2, move my number, change account credentials, and remove payment information where appropriate. Late on day 2 and into day 3, cancel the entertainment subscriptions, separate the remaining phone lines, and discontinue the household internet account once Lauren had enough notice to establish her own. I showered in a stream of water so weak it felt apologetic, put on the clothes I had worn the previous day, and went downstairs. The complimentary breakfast consisted of a battered waffle maker, bruised fruit, and a coffee dispenser that hissed as though it resented being awake. Tyler was behind the desk again. I could not tell whether he had worked all night or had returned for another shift. He nodded at me. "Room 237 survived you?" "Barely," I said. The mattress and I reached a temporary peace agreement. He asked how I had slept, like someone who finally made a decision. Tyler considered that and said, "Strangely specific, but respectable." I filled a foam cup with coffee that tasted strong enough to remove paint and stepped outside. The morning was cool. Leaning against my car, I reviewed the plan and felt something I had not experienced in a long time: control. A woman walking to her vehicle glanced at me when I raised the cup and quietly toasted new beginnings. She probably assumed I was having a breakdown. Perhaps I was. From the outside, a breakthrough and a breakdown can look almost identical. Later that morning, I drove to an old-fashioned diner several miles from the hotel. The booths were covered in red vinyl, and the laminated menu looked as though it had survived several decades without revision. My server's name was Marjorie. She had the calm, observant manner of someone who had watched thousands of people attempt to hide their problems behind breakfast. I ordered pancakes, eggs, bacon, hash browns, toast, and coffee. She looked at the order and asked, "Hungry or heartbroken?" "Is both acceptable?" I said. "Both is common," she replied. Fortunately, pancakes help. Her lack of drama was exactly what I needed. I left a large tip because a simple act of kindness felt remarkable after the previous day. I spent the afternoon driving through parts of the city I had ignored for years. Marriage had narrowed my life into work, errands, bills, household repairs, and obligations. I visited a bookstore and bought 3 novels I had kept postponing. I sat in a park and watched people walk dogs or jog past with the determined expressions of people who genuinely enjoyed exercise. My phone buzzed throughout the day. Lauren asked whether I had paid the electric bill. She wanted to know where I had placed the lawnmower repair receipt. Then she asked me to pick up milk on the way home, as if I were temporarily delayed rather than gone. I did not answer. For years, every vibration from my phone had triggered an immediate response. That afternoon, I discovered that I could allow a message to remain unanswered and the planet would continue rotating. On the second day, I called Vanessa. She had supervised me when I worked as a tutor during my final year of college and had later opened her own academic tutoring company in Millbrook, about 3 hours north. Every few months, she sent an email reminding me that she would hire me if I ever wanted to escape corporate work. I always declined politely because relocating seemed impractical. This time when she answered, she said, "Ethan Cole, please tell me you are finally calling about the position." I asked how she knew. "Because you called on a weekday morning instead of emailing me another carefully worded refusal. Something changed." I told her I was interested. We discussed the role, salary, benefits, and start date. Vanessa also mentioned a furnished apartment above the tutoring office. The previous tenant had moved out, and the lease was month to month. "It isn't elegant," she warned. "The last tenant believed decorative pillows could solve every design problem." I said I would take it. She asked whether I needed to discuss a 3-hour move with my wife. "Vanessa," I said, "the fact that I am willing to move 3 hours away without seeing the apartment should answer that question." She paused only briefly before saying she understood. Within an hour, she emailed the employment documents and lease information. When the call ended, I remained in my car outside the hotel and allowed the reality to settle. I had a job waiting for me. I had somewhere to live. My departure was no longer merely an emotional reaction. It had become a workable transition. That evening, I went to a steakhouse. Lauren had always described as too expensive for an ordinary weeknight. Even though money somehow became available whenever her friends wanted to celebrate something. I ordered a ribeye, a loaded baked potato, and an overpriced beer. The server asked whether I was celebrating. "A new job and a likely divorce," I said. He laughed uncertainly and moved away. I enjoyed the meal anyway. That night, after carefully reviewing the accounts, I began separating my finances. I moved my phone number to an individual plan and initiated the removal of the other adult lines from my account. I canceled the streaming subscriptions and changed passwords on personal services. I scheduled the home internet service to end after a brief transition period so Lauren could establish her own account. Some changes took effect immediately, others processed overnight. I was not taking money that belonged to anyone else, damaging shared property, or preventing anyone from purchasing their own service. I was simply ending my payment for luxuries and personal accounts that I no longer intended to maintain. At 7:43 the next morning, my phone began vibrating across the hotel nightstand. Lauren's first message asked whether I had done something to the Wi-Fi. The next said she had an online meeting soon and needed the internet restored. Then she reported that her phone service had stopped. Patricia messaged to ask whether there was a carrier outage. Derek wrote, "Man, my line is dead. Did you forget to pay the bill?" That question almost made me laugh. I had never forgotten. I remembered every month I had paid, every casual thank you, and every time no one offered to contribute. Lauren's messages quickly shifted from confusion to accusation. She asked what I had done and said Patricia believed she should call me before I did anything crazy. I typed the only response I felt the situation deserved, a thumbs up symbol. The calls began immediately. Lauren called twice. Patricia called, Derek called, Natalie called. Even Lauren's father, Walter, who had not deliberately called me in years, attempted to reach me. I declined each call, silenced the phone, and finished packing. Their panic did not come from losing access to food, shelter, or medical care. It came from being forced to arrange and pay for their own conveniences. I checked out of the Sunset Inn at 11. Tyler accepted the key card and gave me a small salute. "Good luck," he said. "I hope you find what you're looking for." I told him to continue his noble battle with the damaged waffle maker. Then I loaded my belongings into my Honda Accord. Everything I had taken from 10 years of marriage fit into the trunk and back seat. One duffel bag, a box of books, my laptop, 3 pairs of shoes, basic clothes, and a framed photograph of the golden retriever I had owned as a child. The small amount was both depressing and freeing. I headed north toward Millbrook. My phone tried to route Lauren's calls through the car speakers, so I disabled the connection. The radio seemed determined to play songs about failed relationships and personal liberation. When the original recording of I Will Survive came on, I turned it up and sang badly enough to attract the attention of a truck driver in the next lane. He looked over, saw me performing alone in my car, and raised his thumb in approval. I returned the gesture. For a few seconds, two strangers traveling in separate vehicles understood each other perfectly. About an hour into the drive, I stopped at a rest area. Outside, I watched a middle-aged couple move around each other with effortless familiarity. The husband handed his wife a napkin before she asked. She adjusted the collar of his jacket without interrupting their conversation. The gestures were tiny, but they contained more tenderness than most of the grand declarations Lauren posted online. I tried to remember the last time my marriage had felt that natural. Most of our interactions had become negotiations. Which bill I needed to pay, which task I had forgotten, which relative required help, and why my reaction to being dismissed was supposedly the real problem. I wondered whether Lauren and I had ever built a genuine partnership, or whether we had simply followed the expected script until neither of us questioned it. As I approached Millbrook, familiar landmarks appeared. There was the fireworks store that had claimed to be closing for as long as I could remember, the exit to the state park where my college friends and I once pretended to enjoy hiking, and the water tower painted like a basketball. The downtown area still had brick storefronts and locally owned shops. College students crossed the streets carrying backpacks and looking permanently concerned about deadlines. Older residents greeted one another by name. I parked on Main Street, outside a coffee shop that had replaced the old daily grind. The new sign read Claire's Corner. Inside, the shop smelled of coffee and fresh pastries. Behind the counter stood a woman around my age, with dark hair tied back and an apron that read, "Powered by Coffee and Sarcasm." She was steaming milk with absolute concentration. When she looked up, she smiled in a way that felt genuine, rather than professionally required. "Welcome to Claire's Corner. What can I make for you?" "Are you Claire?" I asked. She admitted that she was, and said naming the business after herself had made every bad cup of coffee feel like a personal failure. I ordered a large latte and asked whether Optimism was available as an add-on. Claire laughed and asked whether I had experienced a difficult day. "More like a difficult decade with an especially disappointing birthday at the end," I said. She asked what had happened. I told her my wife had acknowledged my birthday with a frozen pizza left in its wrapper. Claire stopped pouring the milk and looked at me. "You're serious?" "Completely. She did send a congratulatory text from upstairs." Claire finished the latte, made a leaf in the foam, and pushed the cup toward me. "Then this is your belated birthday drink. No charge." I told her that was unnecessary. "Anyone who survives an unheated birthday pizza deserves one decent coffee," she said. I raised the cup. "To new beginnings and strangers who display basic human kindness." Claire lifted her own mug and said she would drink to that, although she had consumed so much espresso that her heart was probably filing a complaint. Her laugh was warm and unguarded. I remained in the shop longer than planned. We talked about the town, her decision to open the business, and the strange ways people learn that a relationship has ended long before anyone officially leaves. By closing time, it was too late to meet Vanessa and collect the apartment keys. Claire told me I could leave my car behind the shop overnight. I reclined the driver's seat and slept there rather than drive while exhausted. My phone died during the night. When I connected it to the charger the following morning, it returned to life with nearly 90 unread messages. The entertainment accounts had completed their overnight closures, adding another layer of panic to the already disconnected phone lines. Lauren had written shortly after midnight that Netflix would not open. 15 minutes later, she asked whether I had changed the password. Before 1 in the morning, she reported that Hulu and every other service had stopped working. Patricia joined the conversation later, insisting there must have been an error and asking me to contact customer service on her behalf. Derek wrote before 4 in the morning to say his phone still had no service. Natalie messaged that Lauren had borrowed a neighbor's phone and was crying about the internet. Walter sent a message shortly before 7. "A real man does not abandon his family." I read that sentence several times. This was the same man who allowed me to cover family dinners, household expenses, and services he benefited from while offering lectures about responsibility. He had missed significant events in his own family's life whenever they interfered with his plans, yet he felt qualified to define manhood for me. I drafted several angry responses and deleted all of them. Walter did not want a discussion. He wanted me to engage so he could place himself in the position of authority. Silence denied him that opportunity. I did, however, send a screenshot to Vanessa with a brief explanation that the man lecturing me about family responsibility had benefited from accounts I funded for years. Vanessa replied that she had known me long enough to recognize who had behaved responsibly and offered, jokingly, to send Walter an educational email about emotional maturity. Lauren's next message said my actions were affecting everyone and asked whether we could at least discuss Patricia's phone, because her mother supposedly required it for work. Patricia was retired. Derek asked whether I could reactivate his line because he had a date that evening. Lauren's friend Rachel, whom I had met only twice, wrote that financially punishing my wife was childish. That word appeared repeatedly. Punishment. They treated my refusal to continue buying services for other adults as an attack. None of them considered that paying for themselves was the normal condition of adulthood. Patricia eventually sent the message she believed would force me to return. She claimed she had raised Lauren to be a good wife and said my behavior was breaking her daughter's heart. She hoped I was proud of myself. Sitting in my car behind the coffee shop, I realized I was proud. Not proud that people were inconvenienced, but proud that I had finally drawn a boundary. For most of my marriage, I had confused peace with surrender. I had prevented conflict by accepting whatever burden was placed on me. Now the conflict had arrived because I had stopped cooperating with my own mistreatment. Claire was unlocking the shop when I walked toward the entrance carrying my toiletry bag. She glanced at me and asked whether I had survived the night. I said I needed a shower and extremely strong coffee. She directed me to a gym 2 blocks away that sold day passes and promised to handle the coffee. "You're saving my life," I told her. "No," she said. "I just recognize another person who is trying to start over." By that afternoon, Vanessa had given me the apartment keys. The space above the tutoring office was small but comfortable. It contained a narrow kitchen, a living room, 1 bedroom, and an extraordinary number of decorative pillows left by the previous tenant, Paige. Several succulents sat near the window in uncertain states of survival. Notes explained which switches controlled which outlets. The shower curtain was covered with inspirational phrases, so I replaced it with a plain blue one. I did not need the words "dream bigger" watching me wash my hair. I spent the next 2 days arranging my clothes, setting up my laptop, and learning the building. On Saturday morning, I woke around 8, made coffee in the small machine on the counter, and considered walking to Claire's for breakfast. Then I heard footsteps climbing the stairs. They were slow, heavy, and deliberate. The knock on my door was not tentative. Whoever stood outside expected to be admitted. Through the peephole, I saw Lauren. She had driven 3 hours and was wearing an old sweatshirt decorated with the phrase, "Live, laugh, love." The irony was so sharp that I had to steady myself before opening the door. "Lauren," I said, "how did you find me?" She told me she had called Vanessa's company and claimed there was a family emergency. Someone had disclosed enough information for her to locate the building. I made a mental note to discuss privacy procedures with Vanessa. Lauren looked past me into the apartment. Her first question was not whether I was all right. "This is what you left me for?" she asked. "This place?" I told her I had not left her for an apartment. I had left because she treated me like an appliance she expected to function without attention. Her eyes filled with tears. "You're really ending our marriage over a pizza?" she asked. There it was. 10 years compressed into one object, so she would not have to examine the pattern behind it. "No," I said. The pizza was the moment I finally understood the problem. I spent years feeling like a supporting character in my own life. On my birthday, I realized I had been removed from the story entirely. Lauren crossed her arms and said she had always supported me. I reminded her that she had given Derek fireworks, catered food, a champagne fountain, and a professional photographer. She had given me an unopened frozen pizza and a text from another room. When I asked why, I said, "You told me I wasn't the kind of person who wanted to be celebrated." "You've always been dramatic," Lauren replied. "You turn everything into an emotional production." I laughed because the accusation was so disconnected from reality. I had spent years avoiding emotional scenes. "And you've spent years calling every reaction dramatic so you never have to consider what caused it." She told me I had abandoned my family without discussing anything with her, disconnected her mother's phone, and disrupted Derek's life. I pointed out that Patricia was a capable 63-year-old woman who could purchase her own plan. "She's family," Lauren said. "Family helps one another. Help is supposed to move in both directions," I replied. "What you are describing is an arrangement in which everyone makes withdrawals, and I keep supplying the account." Lauren changed tactics. Her voice softened. She said Derek needed a phone for work, and that his girlfriend Hannah needed to contact him about their weekend plans. I asked whether she had truly driven 3 hours to argue that a 34-year-old man could not arrange his own phone service in time to coordinate brunch. She told me I had once been kinder and cared more about people. "I still care," I said. "I have simply stopped volunteering to be used." For the first time in years, I looked at Lauren without trying to anticipate what she wanted me to say. She seemed unfamiliar. Perhaps she had changed. Or perhaps I was finally seeing her without the filter of my own excuses. She asked whether I truly wanted to throw away everything we had built. "What did we build together?" I asked. "I built a stable income. I built tolerance for your family's demands. I built a routine that allowed everyone else to feel secure. I built the ability to swallow disappointment without inconveniencing anyone. What did we build as partners? She had no answer. I told her I was not trying to be cruel. I simply would not continue destroying myself to maintain everyone else's comfort. If she wanted internet, she could establish an account. If Patricia wanted a phone, Patricia could pay for it. If Derek wanted streaming services, he could subscribe. If Lauren wanted a husband who showed up for her, then she needed to understand that showing up was supposed to be mutual. So you're done? She asked. I'm done being an afterthought, I said. I'm done being convenient. I'm done being the man who receives frozen pizza while everyone else receives fireworks. Lauren appeared ready to begin another argument. I no longer felt obligated to participate. I told her I needed to prepare for work, although it was Saturday, and my first day at the tutoring center was Monday. Then I wished her a safe drive and closed the door. I did not slam it. I closed it slowly and firmly. She stood in the hallway for a minute before walking downstairs. From the window, I watched her sit in the sport utility vehicle I had helped pay off 2 years earlier. She remained parked for several minutes, probably calling her mother or writing messages about the conversation. When she finally drove away, I did not feel victorious. I felt quiet. I went to Claire's corner and ordered breakfast. Claire took one look at me and asked, "Did something happen?" I told her my wife had appeared at my apartment wearing a sweatshirt that instructed people to live, laugh, and love. Claire leaned against the counter and said, "That sounds less like clothing and more like aggressive symbolism." I laughed harder than the joke deserved. The conversation did not solve my marriage, but it reminded me that being around another person did not always have to feel like work. Over the following week, I settled into a routine. Each morning, I walked to Claire's for coffee. Then I went downstairs to the tutoring center and helped high school students prepare for standardized tests, improve essays, and understand why teachers continued assigning Shakespeare. The work was demanding, but it felt useful. Vanessa gave me room to adjust without pressing for details. Occasionally, she left containers of soup outside my apartment or invited me to lunch. She did not treat kindness like a debt I would later be required to repay. The apartment's creaking floorboards became familiar. Mrs. Bennett, who lived nearby, walked her corgi past the building every morning while singing songs from old musicals. The town was quieter than the suburbs, and the silence initially felt so complete that I became aware of birds, footsteps, and my own thoughts. My new life was simple: work, coffee, reading, and sleep. For the first time in years, simple did not feel empty. It felt peaceful. One Tuesday afternoon, Vanessa called me from downstairs. Her voice carried barely contained amusement. "Your mother-in-law just contacted the tutoring center," she said. Patricia had apparently called several tutoring businesses within a 100-mile radius, claiming an urgent family emergency. She told the receptionist, Emma, that my employer had a legal obligation to provide my home address to relatives in crisis. "What did you tell her?" I asked. Vanessa admitted she had said I had entered a witness protection program and that federal rules prevented her from disclosing my location. Patricia sputtered and ended the call. Emma reportedly considered it the best conversation of her week. Vanessa asked whether Patricia might escalate. I explained that my mother-in-law was not confronting a medical emergency or a missing person. She was furious that I had stopped paying for her phone and entertainment. Vanessa promised that the office would not disclose my information again. After the call, curiosity overcame better judgment. I remembered that Lauren and I had once used a shared Google Drive for household documents, photographs, tax records, and repair receipts. I logged in and discovered that nobody had removed my access. A new folder was titled Emergency Bills. Inside were screenshots of cancellation notices, phone service messages, and emails from streaming companies confirming that the accounts had closed. Someone had even photographed Patricia's phone displaying the words "no service," as though they were documenting evidence for an international tribunal. Another folder contained apology drafts. I opened the first document, titled Emotional Version. It began, "Dear Ethan, we realize we may have taken your generosity for granted." The phrase "may have" did an impressive amount of work. A second draft proposed a financial compromise. Lauren offered to repay half the cost of selected streaming services over 18 months. After years of access, the proposal amounted to only a few dollars each month. A third version, clearly influenced by Patricia, claimed she had been unable to contact her cardiologist because of the disconnected phone and that the matter could become life-threatening. Patricia did not have a cardiologist. She frequently bragged about her excellent health and treated kale like a recreational hobby. Then I found a folder called Ethan Being Difficult. It contained memes. They had spent more effort mocking my boundaries than Lauren had spent acknowledging my birthday. One image showed an irritated television character with a caption about a husband canceling Netflix because of frozen pizza. Another used a distracted boyfriend template to portray me choosing pettiness over mature conversation. Several screenshots of my single thumbs up response had been edited with dramatic captions. One picture placed my face on a cartoon villain and accused me of destroying the family Wi-Fi. I was still staring at the collection when Derek called. We had not spoken since I removed his line, and I almost ignored him. Curiosity won. "We need to talk," he said. He explained that Lauren had been telling people I had experienced a mental collapse and disappeared into the wilderness. "Derek, I live in a college town with 3 coffee shops and a supermarket," I said. "This is not wilderness." He said Patricia was telling people I had stolen money from the family. I reminded him that ending payments from my own account was not theft. After a pause, Derek lowered his voice. "Between us, I think you did the right thing." I asked him to repeat himself because the statement did not sound like the Derek I knew. He admitted that Hannah had asked why a 34-year-old man still depended on his friend's family phone plan. He had not found a respectable answer. The previous day, he had purchased his own plan and paid for several months in advance. "It felt good," he said. "Embarrassing, but good. Like I finally handled something myself." Derek apologized for accepting my help for so long without questioning the arrangement. He said everyone had grown accustomed to me paying, organizing, and showing up because I rarely complained. The birthday party had made the contrast impossible to defend. He had received fireworks and professional photographs while I had received a frozen pizza. "You were always the reliable one," he said. "We acted like that meant you didn't need anyone to care about you." Hearing him acknowledge it caught me off guard. He warned me that Lauren had posted vague messages online about my mental health and asked people to pray for me. Patricia was repeating the story that I had become unstable. "Tell them I found my mind," I said. "Where?" Derek asked. "Under several years of resentment and unpaid bills." He laughed, then said something I never expected from him. "You're kind of my hero right now." I did not feel heroic. I felt tired. Still, his call mattered because it was the first time someone from my old life acknowledged what had actually happened. A few days later, I returned from work and found a cream-colored envelope against my apartment door. My name was written in Lauren's familiar handwriting. The envelope was closed with a gold sticker that said, "With love," which could have been intentional irony or total lack of awareness. I considered throwing it away unopened. Instead, I made tea, sat on the couch among Paige's army of decorative pillows, and opened it. The letter was 3 pages long. Lauren began by saying she had spent a great deal of time thinking and wanted to explain how she felt. She wrote, "I did not mean to make you feel that way. It was a polished non-apology." The wording separated her actions from my reaction, as though my pain had appeared independently. She acknowledged that she might have taken my reliability for granted. She said I made everything look easy, so she forgot how much effort I contributed. For one paragraph, the letter came close to genuine self-awareness. Then its focus shifted. Lauren described how difficult the previous weeks had been for her. She was overwhelmed without me handling bills and practical tasks. Patricia was stressed by the phone situation. Derek had been inconvenienced by obtaining his own service. The internet transition had disrupted Lauren's routine. Not once did the letter directly mention my birthday, the party she threw for Derek, or the frozen pizza. My absence mattered because of the labor and money that disappeared with me. On the 3rd page, Lauren offered an explanation that made me laugh aloud. She claimed I had always been so independent that she did not know how to support me. Because I rarely asked for help, she supposedly had no opportunity to show up. If I had requested more, she wrote, perhaps she would have understood what I needed. In other words, my ability to function had become the reason she did not have to make an effort. My self-sufficiency was presented as a flaw that had made neglect almost unavoidable. The letter ended with the hope that I was doing well and the suggestion that perhaps we could be friends someday. I did not reply. I folded the pages, placed them back in the envelope, and stored them in the bottom drawer of my dresser. I did not keep the letter as a sentimental treasure. I kept it as evidence for myself. Whenever nostalgia tempted me to remember only the better years, I wanted something that clearly showed why returning would cost more than leaving. My phone vibrated a few minutes later. Claire had sent a message saying she had accidentally baked too many muffins and needed assistance preventing waste. This had become a pattern. One day, she accidentally produced extra blueberry muffins. Another day, chocolate chip. That evening, they were lemon poppy seed. I understood that the accidents were probably deliberate, but I saw no reason to challenge a kindness that asked for nothing in return. I walked to the shop. Only 2 customers remained, a student surrounded by highlighters and a man working on a laptop. Claire placed a warm muffin on a plate and poured my usual coffee before I ordered. She asked why I had looked serious when I entered. I told her about Lauren's letter and the claim that my independence had made it difficult to care for me. Claire raised her eyebrows. That is certainly an interpretation, she said. Apparently functioning as an adult was an obstacle to my marriage. Claire asked whether I intended to answer. I told her I had filed the letter in a drawer labeled, at least mentally, reasons I made the correct decision. Claire said that when her former boyfriend suggested they remain friends after leaving her for his fitness instructor, she told him they could be friends in the same way she was friends with her dentist. They could meet twice a year, the interaction would be uncomfortable, and she would leave with a renewed desire to care for herself. I laughed hard enough to nearly inhale part of the muffin. We spent the rest of the evening exchanging stories about former partners, bad decisions, and the strange mixture of fear and relief that accompanies starting over. Over time, Claire and I became close. Nothing happened quickly. I was still processing the end of a 10-year marriage, and she had her own reasons for distrusting sudden romance. We began with coffee and conversation. Then we had dinner. We walked through the state park and admitted that neither of us was as enthusiastic about hiking as our photographs might suggest. She showed me the less visible work behind running a small business. I helped her carry deliveries and repair a shelf. The difference between this relationship and my marriage was not that Claire performed constant grand gestures. It was that attention flowed in both directions. She noticed when I was tired. I noticed when she had worked too long without eating. Neither of us treated care as a performance for social media. My legal separation from Lauren moved forward without a cinematic battle. We communicated only about necessary household and financial matters. The accounts were divided, personal belongings were collected, and formal paperwork followed the required process. I did not attempt to punish her or expose her publicly. Lauren continued telling some people that I had overreacted, while others gradually understood that the pizza was only the final symbol of a much older problem. Derek kept his own phone plan. Patricia eventually purchased one too, proving that the emergency could be solved by entering a store and accepting a bill. 6 months after I left, my 35th birthday arrived. I woke to the smell of something baking in the apartment. Claire had borrowed my key and made a vanilla cake with chocolate frosting. It was not elaborate, but it was real, warm, and chosen with care. At the tutoring center, Vanessa and the other employees sang badly during lunch. She gave me a mug labeled World's Okayest Teacher, which was exactly the kind of gift I enjoyed. That evening, a small package arrived without a return address. Inside was a framed photograph of Lauren and me from the early years of our marriage, back when our smiles still looked effortless. A short note read, "I did not understand what you were carrying. I do now. I'm sorry." It was the first message from her that sounded like an apology without an immediate request attached. I did not respond, but I did not destroy it either. I placed the picture and note in the same drawer as her earlier letter. They were artifacts from a life I had outgrown, not instructions to return to it. Later, Claire and I sat on the couch eating leftover cake. She raised her glass and said, "Happy birthday, Ethan. This year, you finally celebrated yourself." I looked around the small apartment with its creaking floors, fading succulents, and far too many pillows. It was not the life I had imagined 10 years earlier, but it was a life in which I could breathe. I was no longer the husband waiting beside an unopened frozen pizza, hoping someone would decide I mattered. I had learned that sometimes the most important celebration is not the party another person throws for you. It is the moment you stop accepting neglect as the price of being loved and finally choose to show up for yourself.